Okay, so this is me creating the procedural generation. It's very sped up, so I'm going to be trying to do a brief explanation of what's going through my mind while I was creating it. This is going to be very brief and very quick, as I don't want to spend too long on the fine details, especially as I want this to be a quick, just wants to show off my working while creating this. So to begin with, the video is very choppy. I'm sorry about that. There's error in the recording, and it took me so long I didn't want to go back and redo it. But pretty much I'm just creating some materials that I'm going to use for my grey boxing. That will just help me give more of a look, and it'll be more relevant in the second part of the video, so we'll wait till then. But yeah, so I just wanted to create some nice materials that looked possibly even how I might use them in the future ones, but the main importance that they were different and looked separate, so that if I wanted to use multiple ones in my procedural generation, that they would be clearly stood out, so I know exactly, oh, this tile was, brown because it's very clearly brown, so that was the mindset. So this is a much more sped up version of the video. This actually took me close to an hour of just recording. I cut a lot of it out, and I wasn't recording for most of it. I did a lot of testing and background stuff. But right now, I was just checking how big I wanted the blocks to be for the procedural generation, as each section will have their own blocks. So this was like the grass plane, as you can imagine it, and I started off with 100 by 100. That was a bit too big, especially since I was going to have multiple of them, and I didn't want each area or section to be that big, so I dropped that down to 50, and that seemed to be about right. So I've created one for like a rotten, I guess is what I call it, more like dead grass sort of area. But this is where I'm actually creating the first stage of procedural generation. This one is a lot like the one I originally made for the first ever project we ever did on procedural generation. It's really basic. I originally learned it in Jez taught me, my tutor, but I've recently found a video that pretty much taught the same thing, so I was using that as a reference as well, and my previous projects. And if you're more interested in this procedural generation, I'd highly recommend go look at my other blog. There will be a link, so that should help you if you want to learn how to do this yourself. Now, I did run into a few errors while doing this. I did this once before. I actually recorded this just to make sure I remembered how to do it. And it's a bit too early now, but I'll mention it before because I'm pretty sure I skip over it pretty quickly. But the unique name on creating an instance, you got to be really careful with that, especially during the second stage of this video. It caused a massive problem, and it wouldn't spawn stuff, especially in my early testing. You need to make sure that each loop has its own unique instance, or every single time it's being spawned, it has to have a different name. So anytime you're spawning, mainly if it's in a loop, but in anything where you're repeating it, you need to make sure that there's something that differentiates it. So for example, on this you use the loop index to tell you what it is, but you can use whatever you want really, as long as the name is different. So you could call it the position it's in on the X and Y, or whatever you prefer really. But yeah, so the index number is normally what I go for. because I feel that that is the same as position, but in a more cut down version. Now, with this rotation, I was actually amusing. I got into debate with my friend because he has it set to 4 maximum. Now, if you don't know, the computer counts from 0. So technically, when it's doing a rotation, there are 5 rotations altogether. You got the first position, like it just in default, and then it rotates technically in a different position 3 more times, and then there's another one on top of that, making it 5 altogether, where it returns. So a full 360. If you there's 0, 90, 180, 270, 360, 5 altogether. However, I don't see a need for that. Now, I'm just being nitpicky, personally. But if you have it set as 4 maximum, then it kind of messes up the thing, because you've got 2 chances for it to be on 0 or 360, because that's the default. So I think it's better set off as a 3 because it adds a more even randomness. And I actually struggled with like proper random a lot of the time, especially when I was doing creating the multiple versions, multiple levels, or the streaming levels. A lot of my testing, it just did the same thing repeatedly. So like, if I had like 4 different levels, it would do the 0 one a lot more, I noticed, especially if I only had 2 different levels. So the best way you can counter that is just artificially add more. So on the get, for example, you could have it so it gets from 4, 5 different ones, even though there's only like, so if you have 2 levels, make it so it can choose from those 2 levels another 2-3 times. So technically there's 6 levels or 4 levels altogether, even though you technically only have 2. Now, I moved my character up because, if you notice, I fell through, but not only that, I moved up much higher, as it allowed me to look down a lot clearer to make sure my program was working. So that was a big point. And here, I'm basically just making sure that the area is light, so I'm slowly decreasing it over time. I do this a lot. I make it a bit bigger than it should be, because I feel it's important for me to know exactly like whereabouts it is. And for me, even though technically I knew the math from the start, it's a lot easier to go back on your notes and just do a secure check. So slowly going down. So if it's a bit big, you're like, okay, so it just needs to be a bit smaller than this, so the number, what I said, is right, because if it was wrong, then the bigger number, you wouldn't see any gap, or you'd see a much bigger gap than you were expecting. So it's important to focus on this. Now, this is the second part of the video. This is personally all of this was my own creation. I went through quite a few different stages, so I'll try and talk about them more than what's going on the screen, but I'll try and mention the points that I feel more specific. So the first thing you're going to see me do is add 2 for loops. This was actually not the first creation I had. This was the much easier one. However, the first one I ever thought of was using branches instead, and that was a lot more complicated. So it'd be, it would have multiple branches that'd say like, what loop is this on? If this is on loop, 3 out of 4, then loop on this one, but change level to this. Now, technically it did work. However, it added a lot more to the blueprinting than there should be, and a lot of downtime in terms of in terms of streamlining it and making sure it's efficient. Optimizing it was the word that I was looking for. Now, the 2 adds there is pretty simple actually. They're just so when I create this next section, it doesn't spawn on top of it. Now technically you could use this to build like a tower, so where it's adding, it doesn't actually, you know, it doesn't add it on top, it adds it anywhere really. You can have it so it, on this case I have it set so it'll move over, you know, X every single loop and then Y every other loop. But you could have it set so it goes up Z every other loop. I actually did that for one of my earlier projects, and that kind of what inspired me to do this extra one, but it allows me for a lot more creativity. Now, as you can notice, technically the loop should work, but nothing's working. That's because I didn't do the append. This wasn't trying me to demonstrate it, I just forgot again. You need to always make sure that it's appended for each other level, because as you notice now, it'll work. Oh, or not. Oh yeah, I didn't set it so I need to make it so I actually had some distance to it. So basically what happened there is, because the amount of loops was only 1, it would only do a 1 by 1 cube. Now it's set to 2, so technically it's a 3 by 3 cube, because as I said, it starts from 0. And so now what I wanted to do is, now I had an area which was this 10 by 10, well 11 by 11 cube, and then it spawned, you know, 9 of them. I wanted it so each of those areas, each 11 by 11 cube could be a different like section. So you had this grass, and now I wanted these rotten ones. So the way to do that is, as you'll see, I use a mode called select. That just basically means that I've set it so a random integer, you know, choose from one random integer, and on that one it will give you this array, and then you can get something from that array. Now, what took me a lot of time in testing was actually how to make it so it only set the array every single area instead of every single block, because if you notice on this first stage, and I did do it to demonstrate, sorry about that, it's just because you didn't have any of the names. What you'll notice is that it'll just spawn at every single block. It hasn't done it yet. It's because the setup for it isn't working. The random integers work really weird, so I don't know how exactly it went wrong, but I artificially made it go one more, and you'll see it fix itself. I don't know why it works that way, but as you can see, it's not doing it everywhere area, it's doing it every like placement of a node or a level. And so what you had to do is you had to make it so it would only change the number every loop. Now, so I use this as I did it so it changed the variable, so the variables would total it. Now, I just found it easier to move from the set variable, but you could easily just grab the variable as a new one and, you know, use that as your basis quite easily. Now, the reason that's overlapping is because I wasn't doing the math right. I originally thought that it was 500,000 or 50,000, sorry, because it was 10 times the size of the area, which was 5,000. So it would be, you know, 50,000. However, because it's again starting from 0, it was actually 11 times. So as you saw then as well, I increased it to 1,000 extra than that, just to make sure I had a little bit of a gap, just to make sure I was right. So I did the extra bit of a gap, everything worked fine, and now so I know that the size is actually 5,500. That's really all there is to the project. Sorry about the choppy frames. Hopefully everything will work itself out in the future recordings. And have a good day.